Monsters like Jeffrey Epstein don't act alone, and what's starting to come out now is that people around him are not just politicians and billionaires, they were celebrities, athletes, directors, and people you would never expect anywhere near the story. And the craziest part? Some of these names are barely even talked about. Now, before we get into this, I need to make one thing very clear. Being mentioned in the Epstein files does not automatically mean someone committed a crime, but when you start seeing a repeat contact, emails, meetings, personal relationships, at some point it stops being a coincidence and starts raising some serious questions. In this video, we're gonna go through the names that nobody seems to be focusing on, and by the end of this, you're going to see a pattern for yourself.
Would you please state your full name?
I'm Jeffrey Edward Epstein, and my residence address is 6100 Red Hook Boulevard in Virgin Islands.
Do you maintain any other residences presently?
I have vacation homes in New Mexico, Palm Beach, New York, and Paris.
Let's start out with one of the most unexpected names on the list. The magician that many of you probably know and love, David Copperfield. Not exactly the first person you'd think when it comes to something like this, but when the documents started coming out, his name didn't just appear once. There were multiple connections. We're talking about dozens of messages linked to Jeffrey Epstein, being listed as someone who had a close relationship with Epstein, and even being referred to as a friend in the documents. Now, publicly, Copperfield's team has denied any real relationship. They've said that any contact was strictly personal, things like tickets and shows, nothing more. Because investigators reportedly found that Epstein had direct access to Copperfield, including his contact information and records of interactions that went way beyond just business. And then when you look at Copperfield's past controversies, that's where people start connecting the dots. Back in 2017, he was accused of assault in a case that was later dropped. He denied everything and said he was actually the victim of false accusations. But now, with his name appearing in the connection to Epstein, people are looking back at the situation very differently. And I'm not saying that that proves anything, but when someone has past allegations, also shows up in one of the most infamous operations in history of wrongdoing, it's going to raise questions. And right now, those questions are getting louder. Now, you're not going to believe the next one. It's probably one that was never on your radar, and it actually goes a lot deeper than you probably would have expected. This is where things start to feel a lot less like coincidence and a lot more like a network, because this involves NASCAR driver Brian Vickers and his wife, Sarah Kellen. Now, if you don't recognize the name, you probably should. Sarah Kellen was accused of being deeply involved in Epstein's operation, dating back to the early 2000s. She was accused of being someone that brought girls to Epstein. Her name appears multiple times in legal documents, including Epstein's 2008 case, where she was listed as a co-conspirator. She's denied any wrongdoing and has also claimed that she was a victim herself, which she very well may have been. But the accusations against her are serious. We're talking about claims that she helped secure flights, coordinated victims, and even facilitated interactions for Epstein. Now, fast forward, she marries Brian Vickers. And this is where it gets really strange, because Vickers himself also had contact with Epstein. There were emails, conversations, even messages as late as 2019. Think about that. That's after Epstein had already been exposed publicly. So now the question becomes, why maintain a relationship at that point? How deep do those connections actually go? And when you combine his relationship with Epstein, his marriage to someone accused of being part of the operation, it stops looking like a random overlap and starts looking like something much more connected. And you have to wonder if Vickers met his wife through the Epstein network itself. Now let's talk about power, because Epstein didn't just surround himself with random people. He surrounded himself with people who had influence, and one of those names was Steve Tisch, the co-owner of the New York Giants. Now, according to emails, Tish and Epstein had an ongoing communication. They met up, attended games, and had personal conversations. But what really stood out were the emails involving women. Some of the messages included discussions that people are now describing as, at the very least, highly questionable. Conversations about women, introductions, and language that feels coded. Like they knew they shouldn't be saying certain things directly. Now again, there's no confirmed evidence of criminal activity in these specific interactions, but when you combine that with Epstein's known behavior, people are looking at those emails very differently. Because context matters, and the context here is one of the darkest cases in modern history. Now, to be fair, as we mentioned earlier, not every name that we hear in the files actually belongs in the same category. Introducing Tony Hawk. He's probably the best example of that. His name came up due to a claim from a victim who believed that they saw him at one of Epstein's locations. But when people looked deeper into it, the timelines didn't match, locations didn't match, and it appears there was likely a misunderstanding. Tony Hawk himself had addressed it and clarified where his events actually took place. So this is important to understand. Not every name equals guilt. But that doesn't mean the rest of the list gets a free pass. Because the next people we're about to mention, they seem like they have an absolute stamp of guilt on their chest. And here's where we start to see a pattern forming. Because Epstein didn't just associate with powerful people. He often associated with people who were already controversial. Take Woody Allen, a filmmaker who faced long-standing allegations involving his personal life. His connection to Epstein included multiple things, such as meetings, social interactions, and public comments where he described Epstein as interesting. Even after knowing about his past, of course. Now, Woody Allen has said he didn't fully understand the situation at the time, but for a lot of people, that explanation doesn't sit right. And then you have Brett Ratner, a Hollywood director who's faced multiple allegations over the years. He was photographed with Epstein and initially claimed he didn't really know him. But later, emails surfaced suggesting that they had more communication than he had admitted. And this is where the pattern becomes clear. Epstein wasn't just randomly meeting people. He surrounded himself with individuals who already had questionable relations, which raises serious question, that being, was that intentional? And I think we all already know the answer. Now, there's also a bunch of names that are associated with Epstein that just don't make sense. People like Leonardo DiCaprio, Cameron Diaz, Chris Tucker, and even Stephen Hawking. Now, in many of these cases, the connections are weak, or based on things like being at the same event, being mentioned in a testimony, or Epstein claiming that he knew them. And in some cases, those celebrities have denied ever having a relationship with him, which is completely possible. Because Epstein was also known to exaggerate his connections to make himself look more powerful than he actually was. But again, when you see the same names popping up, people are beginning to ask questions. And at the end of the day, out of all of this, people want answers. They want names. But what we got is something more complicated. More names, more connections, and more unanswered questions. So we have to wonder, what's still being kept behind the scenes?